Marcus walking down Jet Bridge, holding ticket and briefcase. He boarded the plane with quiet confidence, dressed sharply, ticket in hand, and a seat in first class. But instead of respect, whispers followed him. Eyes narrowed, smirks spread, and the crew's laughter cut deeper than words. To them, he didn't belong there. His very presence was a challenge to their assumptions. What they didn't know was that the man they mocked carried a power they could never imagine. This flight wasn't just a trip, it was about to expose prejudice at 30,000 feet. And the ending? No one on that plane would ever forget it. Marcus boarding first class with ticket and briefcase. That day, he wasn't stepping into an office tower, he was boarding a flight. First class wasn't new to him. He had taken countless trips before. Still, there was something about this moment that carried weight. The polished ticket in his hand wasn't just a seat assignment. It was a symbol of how far he had come, of sacrifices made and barriers broken. As he walked toward his seat, he thought only of the hours ahead, time to relax, to prepare for meetings that would shape the company's future. But what Marcus couldn't see were the quiet stares already following him, the dismissive glances, the subtle smirks. To him, it was just another flight. To them, it was an opportunity to question whether he belonged. What none of them realized was that this journey was about to reveal far more than a destination. Marcus in his office, city lights glowing behind him. Marcus was no stranger to hard work. For years, he had built his career brick by brick, proving himself in rooms where he was often the only black man at the table. On the ground, he was a respected leader, a man whose decisions shaped the future of an entire company. But away from boardrooms and meetings, Marcus was just a man who loved quiet mornings, strong coffee, and the comfort of knowing he had earned his place in the world. Marcus seated, attendant checking his ticket with fake smile. Marcus slid into his seat, tucking his briefcase neatly beneath him. Around him, the hum of passengers settling in filled the cabin. But beneath that noise, there was something sharper, something directed at him. He caught the sideways glances from the crew, the forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. One attendant leaned toward another, whispering, and soon a ripple of muffled laughter followed. Marcus knew that laugh. It wasn't humor, it was judgment. As the plane filled, the atmosphere grew heavier. A woman across the aisle shifted uncomfortably, pulling her purse closer, as if proximity to him was a risk. A flight attendant paused by his seat, her tone overly cheerful, the kind used for a child who had wandered somewhere he didn't belong. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right seat?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough volume for others to hear. Heads turned, eyes lingered. Marcus held up his ticket calmly, his voice steady, though inside, anger pressed against his composure. The attendant took it, her smirk betraying the performance, then returned it with a clipped nod. But the damage was done. The cabin buzzed with unspoken questions. How could he afford this seat? Why was he here? Marcus receiving water last while attendants smirk. Minutes stretched, each interaction dripping with quiet insult. Water served last. Requests ignored until repeated. Polite smiles withheld while others received warmth. It wasn't the grand, blatant acts of hate Marcus had fought against in his career. It was the steady drip of disrespect, 1,000 paper cuts cutting into his dignity. Water splashing on Marcus's sleeve as attendants laugh. And then came the breaking point. A flight attendant, balancing a tray, stumbled slightly near his row. The liquid splashed across his armrest, droplets staining his sleeve. She laughed, brushing it off with a careless, "Oh, accidents happen." But Marcus saw the grin exchanged with her colleague. To them, it wasn't an accident. It was a performance. Attendant suggesting Marcus move to the back, passengers reacting. He sat in silence, every muscle tense, fighting the urge to call them out. He had been here before, misjudged, underestimated, pushed aside. Yet this time felt different. This wasn't a closed-door meeting or a passing stranger. This was public. A stage where the entire cabin could watch prejudice dressed as professionalism. And still, the attendants weren't done. One leaned in close, voice laced with mockery, suggesting he might feel more comfortable in the back of the plane. Gasps rippled through nearby passengers. Some looked away, unwilling to intervene. Others stared, waiting for his response, as if his reaction would define him. Marcus inhaled slowly, steadying himself. He knew the truth. They didn't. The truth that would shift the balance of this flight in a way no one could anticipate. But for now, he stayed silent, letting the tension build like a storm waiting to break, because when it did break, the fallout would change everything. Marcus revealing the Golden Company logo folder. The laughter was louder now, no longer hidden behind clipped smiles. Marcus sat rigid in his seat as the attendants hovered near him, their whispers sharp enough for the cabin to catch. One leaned close, her tone dripping with condescension. "People like you usually sit in coach, don't they?" The words weren't shouted, but they might as well have been. A few passengers chuckled under their breath. Others turned away, pretending not to see the humiliation unfolding in front of them. Marcus's jaw tightened. He felt the sting of every eye on him, the silent verdict cast without a trial. His sleeve was still damp from the accident, his dignity chipped away piece by piece. The attendants pressed further, asking once again if he wanted to move to the back, their grins daring him to object, daring him to raise his voice so they could label him the problem. For a moment, Marcus felt the weight of every time this had happened before, on the streets, in boardrooms, in restaurants where respect was rationed out based on skin color. The injustice pressed down, heavier than the cabin air. His heart pounded in his chest, but his voice stayed steady, colder than ice. He reached into his briefcase, sliding out a folder embossed with the company logo. Marcus is holding a folder as the cabin reacts in shock. The attendants froze, their laughter faltering as his name glinted in gold across the cover. Marcus locked eyes with them, his silence louder than any outburst. The cabin hushed, passengers leaning in. The attendants' smirks faded as realization crept across their faces. The man they had mocked, dismissed, and humiliated wasn't just another passenger trying to fit where he didn't belong. He was the one who signed their paychecks, their CEO, and in that moment, everything shifted. The cabin was silent, heavy with the weight of revelation. The same crew who had mocked Marcus now stood pale and trembling, their forced confidence shattered in an instant. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding his gaze, others staring as if seeing him for the first time. Respect that had been denied minutes earlier now flooded toward him. But it was too late. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than any lecture, and his presence alone revealed the truth. Their prejudice had blinded them to the very man who held their futures in his hands. For him, the victory wasn't in watching their fear. It was in knowing the mask had slipped, exposing something far larger than a single flight. When the plane landed, Marcus walked off with the same calm dignity he had boarded with. Marcus, reflecting alone by the airport window. But inside, he carried the sting of a familiar wound. It wasn't about one crew, one airline, or one humiliating moment. It was about a system that still judged success by the color of skin, not the content of character. A reminder that even the highest title couldn't shield him from assumptions that cut deep. And maybe that's the lesson. Racism doesn't always shout. It whispers, it laughs, it mocks in places where dignity should be unquestioned. Marcus walking out of the airport at night, city lights glowing. Marcus's story is one man's experience, but it echoes for millions more. So the question remains, how many more times must these stories unfold, at 30,000 feet or on the ground, before respect becomes the default and equality more than a promise? Because until then, the flight may end, but the journey for justice never does.